The void between stars ripped open without warning, a silent rupture that defied all known physics of the Star Wars galaxy. There was no hyperspace trail, no warp signature, nothing to hint that a storm of impossible power would fall upon the outer rim. The planet below, a barren rocky orb orbiting a dim red sun, lay in the shadows of distant gas giants. Imperial sensors flickered and sputtered as a strange energy pulsed through the system, a sensation that made even the most experienced technicians uneasy. And then they saw it, a flash of light, green and gold, burning brighter than the sun. Kratos fell to his knees on the dusty ground, his Leviathan axe skidding across cracked stone as he struggled to regain balance. The air smelled strange, metallic, tinged with ozone, and heavy with something unfamiliar. He could feel the cold, biting edge of this universe, a subtle opposition to the divine energy coursing through his veins. The rage, normally an ever-present and controllable inferno, simmered unevenly. The force here tangled with it, a current he could not command. Beside him, Atreus stumbled, bow slipping from his fingers, eyes wide as they drank in the alien sky. "Father, what is this place?" Atreus' voice carried both fear and wonder. He had grown accustomed to realms ruled by giants, monsters, and gods alike, yet nothing in his memory resembled the skies or technology stretching across this world. Lights and structures floated in the distance, cold and geometric. Humming with life, he could neither comprehend nor predict. Kratos rose slowly, muscles straining under the weight of his godlike strength tempered by unfamiliar forces. "We've crossed into a world not our own," he said, voice low and steady, each word deliberate. "Keep your senses sharp. I do not know what waits here." His eyes scanned the horizon. Distant, angular ships streaked across the crimson horizon, metal hulls glinting in the fading light. These ships were unlike anything he had seen, sleek, yet menacing, bristling with energy weapons and symbols that pulsed with authority. Before they could move, a squad of Imperial scouts touched down nearby, their armor glinting under the dim sun. The soldiers froze, weapons raising as if their instincts alone recognized the danger. Kratos stepped forward, the aura of his presence enough to make even trained troopers hesitate. The force tugged at him subtly, a quiet whisper that made his rage wobble, but he resisted it. He did not know these people, nor did he understand their rules. But he knew this. Survival demanded action. With a single fluid motion, he raised the Leviathan axe. Its runes glowed, pulsating with the chill of ice and the heat of his controlled fury. The first trooper fired a blaster, the red bolt striking the ground mere inches from Kratos' boot. He swung the axe in a brutal arc, and the energy deflected around him in a shimmering wave. The soldiers, unprepared for the sheer speed and strength of this godlike warrior, scattered as he moved with inhuman precision. The dust rose, and the smell of scorched earth mingled with the ozone tang of blaster fire. Atreus, trembling but composed, knocked an arrow and let it fly, channeling his magic-infused energy into a small pulse. It struck one of the armored figures squarely in the chest, sending him skidding backward, unconscious but alive. The boy's wide eyes met Kratos in silent acknowledgement. This was survival, but not wanton slaughter. Their skills combined, a god and a half-god child, were overwhelming, yet necessary. As the last of the Imperial troopers fled, a voice boomed across comms, crackling through some unseen channel. It was calm, deliberate, and cold, saturated with authority. Unidentified presence. Scanners indicate a powerful energy signature. Do not engage further without orders. Imperial High Command has been notified. The words were alien, but the threat was understood. Somewhere, far beyond their view, forces had taken notice. Kratos did not reply. He did not need to. His eyes scanned the horizon again, wary for movement. The galaxy was larger, more complex, and far stranger than any realm he had encountered in Midgard or the Nine Realms. Even the gods of his own world had been comprehensible, their logic and power bound by rules he understood. Here, the rules themselves seemed in flux, the force tangling with his rage and magic in ways he could barely sense. He knew, with the instinct honed from countless battles, that caution and strategy would be as necessary as his raw power. "Father," Atreus said again, softer this time, his voice carrying the weight of realization. "This is bigger than anything we've faced." Kratos knelt beside him, placing a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then we face it as we always have. Together. Strength, strategy, and the will to endure. This world tests us, but it cannot break us." The words were steady, unshaken, though a flicker of uncertainty passed through him, an acknowledgement that the force of this universe was not like the magic of Jotunheim or the pantheon of Midgard. Adaptation was essential. Survival demanded it. In the distance, the hum of engines and the faint glint of TIE fighters caught Kratos' eye. He recognized combat instinct in their formation, an echo of the battles he had fought, yet different. This was a war unlike any he had faced, a galaxy in conflict, entire civilizations at stake, and the subtle pull of unseen powers guiding the flow of events. He could fight, yes, but to thrive here he would need to understand, adapt, and choose allies wisely. The decision would not be simple, nor would it be easy. Atreus, watching his father, finally broke the tense silence. "We should move," he said, knocking another arrow. "They'll regroup, and whatever this world is, it's not like ours. We can't just fight everything that comes at us." Kratos nodded, rising with a fluid grace that belied the unfamiliar gravity of this place. "Then we move. And when they come again, they will learn why gods do not kneel lightly." Above them, the red sun dipped closer to the horizon. Shadows stretched across the jagged terrain, and the first tendrils of galactic night approached. Kratos and Atreus, god and demigod, warrior and child, stood at the edge of an alien world. Their arrival had gone unnoticed by no one. The Empire, sensing an anomaly that defied their comprehension, would pursue. Rebels, seeing potential in a being of unparalleled might, would seek understanding. And somewhere in the shadows, forces older and darker than the Republic itself would take note of this sudden intrusion. The galaxy had changed, and Kratos, ever wary, ever calculating, understood that he would need more than strength to navigate this place. He would need cunning, restraint, and the clarity to make impossible choices, decisions that could reshape worlds and test the very limits of his godly will. "If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy," he called quietly to Atreus, almost as if speaking to the unseen universe itself, "hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you." The call to action faded into the alien wind, carried across the barren rocks and jagged cliffs, mingling with the scent of ozone and scorched earth. Above, stars began to pierce the darkening sky, unblinking and eternal, watching as a god from another reality began his journey through a galaxy far, far away. Kratos took the first step toward the unknown. The Force stirred around him, curious, cautious, and almost reverent. Whatever waited in the coming hours, Imperial pursuit, rebel curiosity, or Sith calculation, would soon test not only his might, but the very essence of his being. And in that moment, Kratos knew, the Star Wars galaxy had never faced anything like him before. The barren landscape of the Outer Rim stretched endlessly, scarred by jagged rock formations and shallow craters, a terrain that seemed designed to test the endurance of any being foolish enough to traverse it. Kratos and Atreus moved steadily, their shadows elongated by the dying red light of the sun, slipping through the rocky gullies with the silent efficiency of hunters. Yet the air hummed with a persistent alien tension, the quiet before a storm only the galaxy itself could conjure. Kratos felt it in his bones. This universe did not bend to his understanding. The Force threaded through everything, and though he did not yet grasp its full measure, he could sense its subtle probing against his own godly aura. Atreus, always perceptive, whispered, "Father, I feel it too. Something watches." His eyes, bright and alert, scanned the distant horizon where the jagged silhouettes of structures rose unexpectedly, angular and geometric, reflecting the red light like black glass. The boy's instincts had always been finely tuned, a combination of mortal awareness and his inherited touch of foresight. Here, though, even his visions shimmered with uncertainty, corrupted by the alien energy of this galaxy. Kratos said nothing, his instincts absorbing every nuance of the environment. The Leviathan axe rested across his broad shoulders, runes glowing faintly against the encroaching darkness. His senses extended beyond the mere visual. He could feel the pull of energy, foreign, chaotic, yet strangely structured, emanating from the massive constructs ahead. They were not natural. These were weapons, ships, stations, or perhaps combinations of all three. They pulsed with authority, and Kratos understood, without fully knowing how, that these beings commanded loyalty and fear in equal measure. Suddenly, the rumble of engines split the air. TIE fighters darted across the horizon, their iconic hum cutting through the stillness. Imperial scouts had located them. Kratos' grip tightened on the axe. "They follow," he said. "We cannot hide here." Atreus' bow was ready, energy arrows shimmering faintly in the dim light. The boys' confidence had grown in the brief hours since their arrival, tempered by the necessity of survival. Together, they were more than a father and son. They were a force unlike anything this galaxy had yet seen. The first skirmish came swiftly. Imperial blasters tore through the rocky outcrops, their red beams scorching stone and dust. Kratos moved like a phantom, each swing of his axe deflecting blasts or sending troopers sprawling. The force around him twisted subtly, attempting to disrupt his rhythm, but Kratos adapted. Rage simmered beneath his control, the alien energy of this world clashing with his own divine fury in a way that sharpened, rather than dulled, his senses. Atreus fired from behind, each arrow charged with a flicker of magical energy that knocked drones and scouts alike off their feet. They pressed onward, deeper into the canyon system, where the jagged rocks gave way to a massive, partially concealed Imperial outpost. Its towers rose into the sky like black spires, bristling with turrets and surveillance arrays. Sensors blinked erratically, disrupted by the strange divine aura surrounding Kratos and the latent magic emanating from Atreus. Inside, officers struggled to interpret the readings, some whispering of unknown powers, others clutching the simple explanation that this was a threat beyond understanding. Kratos and Atreus approached cautiously, aware that brute force alone could not achieve their goal. They needed intelligence, a foothold in this galaxy, and possibly allies, or at least leverage. Kratos crouched behind a jagged outcrop, eyes narrowing. "We assess first. Strength alone will not win this war." He gestured toward Atreus, who nodded, silently acknowledging the strategy. They were hunters now, but they had to understand the terrain and the rules of this new battlefield. Inside the outpost, the Imperial commander examined the disrupted sensors, brow furrowed. "Sir, something has breached the perimeter. Energy readings unprecedented. Not droids, not known life forms. It moves like gods." The officer's voice trembled, though his training kept him formal. A shadowed figure emerged from the rear of the command center, a Sith Lord, tall and imposing, dark robes rippling in the dim, artificial light. His presence radiated the dark side, a subtle yet palpable force that tingled at the edges of Kratos' perception. Kratos felt the pull immediately. This being was strong, unlike any he had encountered, but different. He was not a god, not in the Norse sense, yet the influence he wielded was undeniable. Kratos' fists clenched, his rage simmering against this alien pull, but he forced it down. He had learned over countless battles that raw power without strategy led to destruction. He could not allow the unfamiliar to unbalance him. Atreus, sensing his father's tension, whispered, "Father, they're testing us." The tactical observation continued as the outpost security forces scrambled to intercept. Kratos moved with precision, cutting through patrols, his Leviathan axe a blur of ice-tipped steel, sending troopers tumbling without lethal intent. He understood that indiscriminate slaughter would draw too much attention. Atreus' arrows provided ranged cover, striking the energy pylons that powered turrets, temporarily disabling them. They were advancing through careful, lethal choreography, A father and son moving as a single entity, each action measured, each response calculated. Above them, the TIE fighters executed tight formations, attempting to flank. Kratos' divine senses detected their approach before they appeared visually. He swung the axe in a wide arc, sending shock waves through the canyon walls. Blasts from the fighters ricocheted unpredictably, yet each one was mitigated by the combined force of his strength and Atreus' magic. The energy pulse distorted the air, creating a barrier of sorts, a protective buffer against the Empire's technologically superior arsenal. As the skirmish escalated, the Sith observed silently, his presence like a knife in the air. He extended a hand subtly, testing the resonance of Kratos' energy with the Force. A pulse of dark intent brushed against the godlike aura, probing for weakness. Kratos felt it, a cold, deliberate touch, and his fists twitched, muscles taut. Rage rose, but he contained it, channeling the simmering fire into a focused, controlled energy. He knew this was no ordinary enemy. This was a test, a challenge, and possibly the first step toward understanding this galaxy's hierarchy. Kratos paused momentarily, surveying the battlefield. The Empire was organized, disciplined, relentless, but predictable. Their technology, though formidable, could be countered with clever use of terrain and his own divine power. Atreus, reading the boy's tension, stepped forward. "Father, I can create a distraction, lure them away from the spire. You can move in closer." Kratos nodded. "Do it, but be ready always." Atreus' arrows arced gracefully, their magical pulses striking the outpost's energy conduits. Sparks erupted, alarms blaring, drawing soldiers into corridors and away from the main towers. Kratos seized the opportunity, charging forward with godlike speed, his axe slicing through doors and defenses. The Force interfered sporadically, tugging at his energy, but he compensated instinctively, each movement precise, powerful, and devastating. By the time they reached the central spire, the outpost was in chaos. TIE fighters struggled to maintain formation above, turrets were disabled, and the Sith observed, intrigued rather than concerned. Kratos stood at the base of the tower, breathing steadily despite the exertion. "This world, it is unlike any we have faced," he muttered, voice low, almost to himself. "We will learn its rules, and we will bend them to survive." Atreus glanced at him, bow ready. "And if they follow us further?" Kratos' eyes narrowed, the glow of the Leviathan axe reflecting the dim lights of the outpost. "Then we adapt. We fight when we must, we hide when we can, and we make choices that gods fear to make." The words were calm, but the weight behind them was immense. The galaxy had awakened to their presence, and the next moves would determine not just survival, but the scale of influence they could wield in a world that did not yet understand the force of divine vengeance. The red sun dipped fully below the horizon, leaving the outer rim in a cold, starlit darkness. Shadows stretched, mingling with smoke and dust, and the first whisper of galactic night carried across the barren rocks. Kratos and Atreus, standing side by side, were no longer merely intruders, they were anomalies. They were the unknown variables in a galaxy governed by fear, order, and power. And far above, unseen, but undeniably present, the Force observed, and somewhere in the shadows, the eyes of the Sith lingered. The hum of distant engines grew louder as night settled over the outer rim, the alien stars casting cold, pale light across the jagged terrain. Kratos and Atreus moved with deliberate caution, their forms slipping through shadows with a predator's grace. Every step was measured, every glance scanning for threats, yet the Force, subtle, persistent, and unknowable, whispered along the edges of Kratos' perception. Something was watching, something strong, something that even he could not easily strike down. It did not take long for the hunters to reveal themselves. A squadron of TIE fighters screamed across the horizon, streaking toward the planet's surface in aggressive formation. They were faster and more disciplined than any craft Kratos had ever encountered, and the pilots seemed attuned to some instinctive rhythm he did not yet understand. He gritted his teeth and hefted the Leviathan axe. The pulsing glow of the runes cast erratic shadows across his face, and the air itself seemed to shiver at the anticipation of violence. Atreus readied his bow, energy arrows faintly glowing in the dim light. "Father, they're coordinating," he said, noticing the subtle adjustments in flight patterns. "It's like they can predict each other's moves." Kratos nodded. "They rely on numbers and discipline. We rely on instinct." With that, he sprinted forward, the ground beneath him trembling, as if the planet itself recognized the presence of a god. The TIE fighters swooped low, firing, but Kratos moved with uncanny precision. Blaster bolts struck the rocky terrain, sending sparks and shards of stone into the night air, while he deflected some with his axe in a controlled arc, sending shock waves that disrupted the formation of enemy fire. The Imperial pilots adapted, circling back in tighter formations, but Kratos and Atreus were already moving toward higher ground, a jagged ridge overlooking the outpost and its surrounding plains. From this vantage point, Kratos could survey the battlefield, his godlike senses cutting through the alien environment. "They underestimate us," he muttered, "and that will be their mistake." Below, the Imperial soldiers scrambled to regroup. Scanners were picking up the residual energy from Kratos and Atreus, though the readings were erratic, almost incomprehensible. The troopers whispered of a godlike presence, and rumors began to spread of an intruder who moved faster than thought, struck harder than any army, and was immune to ordinary blaster fire. For the first time, the Empire realized that the anomaly they faced could not be approached with conventional tactics alone. From the shadows, a Sith observer extended his hand subtly, testing the resonance of Kratos' energy with the dark side. The sensation was cold and probing, curling around Kratos' aura like tendrils of shadow. For a moment, the god's body tensed, a flicker of the familiar rage rising within him, but he clenched his jaw and let it subside. The force in this universe was not merely energy, it was sentient, aware, and capable of probing the minds and spirits of the living. Kratos recognized the danger immediately. This was not a mere skirmish. It was a calculated test of strength, discipline, and will. Atreus, sensing his father's tension, whispered, "Father, we need a plan. Charging in blindly will get us killed." Kratos' eyes narrowed, scanning the terrain. "Then we adapt. We use their confidence against them, draw them in, then strike where they are weakest." He gestured toward a narrow canyon ahead, flanked by jagged cliffs. "They rely on their numbers and formations. We will manipulate the battlefield." With a sudden leap, Kratos vaulted to the ridge, landing with the force of a hammer blow. The rocks trembled beneath him, and the TIE fighters banked sharply to avoid debris. From above, he swung the Leviathan axe with surgical precision, sending out arcs of ice-charged energy that disrupted enemy flight paths. Below, Atreus used his magic-enhanced arrows to target energy pylons, creating controlled explosions that disoriented the soldiers and forced their attention upward. The skirmish escalated into chaos. Blaster fire ricocheted unpredictably off the rocks. TIE fighters struggled to maintain formation, and Imperial troops found themselves disoriented by the combined divine and magical assault. Kratos' presence was overwhelming, yet he maintained control, moving with a fluidity that seemed almost preternatural. Each motion was purposeful, each strike calculated to maximize disruption while conserving his own strength. From the edge of the canyon, a larger Imperial vessel appeared on scanners, an assault shuttle, carrying reinforcements and possibly the command structure. Kratos felt the weight of their arrival, the increased risk, and the subtle pull of the Force intensifying. He knew that they were being observed, not just as threats, but as subjects of study. Somewhere in the galaxy, beings of unimaginable power were assessing him, calculating his weaknesses, and preparing contingencies. Atreus, knocking another arrow, looked up at his father. "They're coming, father. More of them. And this energy, it's strange. I can't read it properly." Kratos' eyes hardened. "Then we fight with what we have. No hesitation. No mercy where necessary. Adaptation is survival." He crouched, surveying the narrow canyon where the shuttles would land. His mind raced, calculating angles, trajectories, and sequences of attack. Despite the alien technology and the unfamiliar rules of this galaxy, his experience in countless wars, battles, and apocalyptic conflicts provided an edge. He was a god of war, and though the Force interfered subtly, it could not diminish his mastery of strategy and combat instinct. The shuttles landed with precise coordination, deploying stormtroopers into the canyon below. Kratos leapt down, landing amid them with an earth-shattering force. Blades of chaos flashed in tandem with the Leviathan axe, sending soldiers tumbling and weapons clattering across the rocky floor. Atreus provided covering fire, his energy arrows striking with pinpoint accuracy. The Imperial forces, trained for order and discipline, struggled against the unpredictable fury of the god and his son. From above, the Sith observed, his presence like a shadow pressing against the edges of reality. He extended a subtle force pull toward Kratos, testing his resistance. For a moment, the rage threatened to surge uncontrollably, but Kratos ground his teeth and channeled it into controlled power. Every strike became a lesson, every movement a statement. He would not yield. The Empire may have strength, discipline, and numbers, but they had not faced a god before. The skirmish reached its apex as Kratos and Atreus maneuvered the battlefield, forcing the Imperial troops into choke points and exploiting terrain advantages. Kratos' divine senses compensated for the Force's subtle interference, his godly reflexes allowing him to anticipate and counter attacks before they landed. By the time the last shuttle lifted off, the outpost was in ruins, soldiers scattered, and the Sith observer remained, intrigued, not enraged. He had not underestimated Kratos. He had merely been impressed. Kratos turned to Atreus, breathing heavily, his body glowing faintly with the residual energy of his godly power. "This is only the beginning," he said, voice low and resolute. "The galaxy will not easily understand us. We must be ready for what comes next." Atreus nodded, bow at the ready. "Then we continue. Whatever comes, we face it together." Above, the stars shimmered coldly, indifferent to the struggles below, yet the galaxy itself had shifted. Something monumental had arrived, a force that would challenge the Empire, attract the curiosity of the rebellion, and draw the attention of powers older and darker than either side could imagine. Kratos and Atreus pressed onward, stepping into the unknown, aware that every move from this point forward would ripple across the galaxy in ways they could not yet foresee. Dawn broke over the rugged outer rim world, pale light spilling across jagged cliffs and the twisted remnants of the Imperial outpost. Kratos and Atreus moved cautiously through the rubble, their movements precise and deliberate. The night's battle had left a residue of tension in the air, a mingling of ozone, scorched metal, and the faint, strange energy that radiated from Kratos himself. Atreus could sense it, feel the weight of something vast and incomprehensible pressing at the edges of their awareness. "Father, they'll come after us," Atreus said softly, scanning the horizon. "The Empire doesn't forget." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "Nor do we. But we do not fight blindly. They are disciplined, predictable in their arrogance. We will use that against them." He hefted the Leviathan axe, its runes glowing faintly with residual magic. His muscles tensed, and he felt the force around him, a strange, pulsing presence that seemed to probe for weakness. Unlike the gods of his own world, the force was alive here, intelligent, testing him. And he welcomed the challenge. Their movement through the broken terrain was interrupted by a faint vibration in the ground, subtle, deliberate, but unmistakable. Kratos paused, listening. Atreus crouched beside him, bow ready. A squad of bounty hunters emerged from the shadows, their armor gleaming in the dim morning light, weapons leveled. They were not Imperial soldiers, not Jedi, not Sith. They were mercenaries of the galaxy's underworld, drawn by rumors of an unknown godlike presence wreaking havoc in the outer rim. Kratos' lips pressed into a thin line. "They test us," he said. "Not for loyalty, but for profit. Atreus, stay close." The hunters advanced cautiously, wary of the sheer presence of Kratos' aura. Blasters fired, and the air crackled with energy as Kratos deflected bolts with a swing of the Leviathan axe. His godlike reflexes compensated for the unfamiliar technology, each movement precise, controlled, lethal. Atreus responded in kind, firing energy arrows with magical precision, each strike disabling weapons and knocking mercenaries off balance. The bounty hunters, trained for cunning and improvisation, adapted quickly, splitting into small squads, attempting to flank. But Kratos anticipated their moves with uncanny foresight. He moved like a storm incarnate, his axe and fists blending with Atreus' magic into a synchronized dance of destruction. One mercenary, cloaked in reflective Beskar-like armor, attempted to strike from above, swinging a vibroblade with blinding speed. Kratos caught the strike with the haft of his axe, deflecting it with a grunt, and countered with a devastating upward swing that sent the attacker tumbling across the rocky terrain. Atreus' arrow followed, ensuring the mercenary was incapacitated but not killed. Kratos' new world demanded subtlety, and unnecessary bloodshed would draw attention he did not yet want. As the skirmish reached its peak, a new player entered the scene, a Mandalorian warrior, jetpack hissing, blaster rifle aimed with deadly precision. The hunter assessed Kratos and Atreus instantly, recognizing the power and strategy at play. This was no ordinary target. This was a god walking among mortals. The Mandalorian fired a series of rapid shots, but Kratos' reflexes were impeccable. Each blast was deflected, each movement calculated to neutralize the threat while maintaining momentum. "You move well," the Mandalorian called out, voice modulated through a helmet comm. "But this fight does not have to be your last. Stand down or be destroyed." Kratos paused, considering. He did not trust these outsiders, yet he recognized the potential advantage of dialogue. "We are not here to conquer," he said, voice low and resonant. "We seek survival. Move aside and no harm comes to you." The Mandalorian tilted his head, analyzing the godlike warrior before him. After a tense moment, he disengaged, jetpack propelling him upward and away from the immediate battle. "For now," he said, voice cold but measured. "But we will meet again." Kratos exhaled, lowering his axe slightly. "Good. We cannot afford unnecessary enemies." Atreus, still vigilant, nodded silently. The boy was learning quickly. In this galaxy, raw power was respected, but alliances and strategy could determine life or death. The encounter had served a purpose. It had tested them, gauged their abilities, and, crucially, revealed the complexity of this galaxy. Kratos realized that survival required understanding, not just of power, but of politics, factions, and the subtle manipulations that guided the Empire, the underworld, and every entity in between. As they pressed forward, they reached the edge of a vast plateau overlooking a sprawling city, its towers punctuating the sky with lights and signals alien to their eyes. The force here was thick, a tangible current flowing through the streets, buildings, and ships alike. Kratos could feel its pull, direct, probing, intelligent. Atreus shivered slightly. "Father, it's alive." Kratos nodded. "The city will test us. We must move carefully. Here, strength alone will not suffice. Observe, adapt, and strike when necessary." His gaze swept across the horizon, noting patrol routes, surveillance towers, and the faint glow of unknown energy signatures. The city was a labyrinth, not merely of streets and structures, but of influence, power, and potential allies, or enemies. Their next challenge emerged swiftly. A Republic envoy, sensing the energy signature from their earlier battle, dispatched a squad of Jedi to investigate. Their lightsabers hummed faintly in the distance, blue and green blades cutting through the morning haze. The Jedi approached with caution, sensing power beyond their comprehension. Kratos recognized their intent, not hostility, but evaluation. They would test, probe, and, if necessary, confront. Atreus whispered, "Father, the Jedi. They sense your power." Kratos' lips tightened. "They will not understand our purpose. Be ready. We strike only if necessary. Otherwise, we must use this as leverage." His mind raced, calculating probabilities, outcomes, and potential strategies. In this galaxy, knowledge was as lethal as any weapon, and Kratos intended to wield both. As the Jedi drew closer, Kratos and Atreus prepared. The air hummed with anticipation, the Force thick and unrelenting. Every movement, every choice, would carry consequences beyond immediate survival. The galaxy was alive, aware, and watching, and the god from another reality would have to navigate its complexities with precision, power, and the unyielding will that had carried him through countless battles. This encounter, Kratos knew, would mark the first of many pivotal decisions in this strange, vast universe. Allies, enemies, and moral choices awaited, each one a step toward understanding the balance of power, survival, and the unpredictable tides of fate in the Star Wars galaxy. The city sprawled before them like a labyrinthine hive of light and shadow, its streets pulsing with life and energy foreign to Kratos' senses. Every corner, every tower, and every hovering speeder carried the subtle vibrations of the Force, intertwining with the rhythm of the urban environment. Kratos surveyed the city from the jagged cliffs above, Leviathan axe in hand, Atreus at his side. The two had survived the Empire, mercenaries, and Mandalorian scouts, but the Jedi approaching now introduced a different kind of tension. Less brute force, more deliberate, probing, and ethical. Atreus whispered, "Father, they're coming closer. I can feel their presence, not just their blades, but their intent." Kratos' jaw tightened. "Then we do not strike first. We observe. Every movement in this world has consequences, and the Jedi, they are unpredictable." He flexed his fingers around the axe's haft, feeling the residual energy of his godly power pulse faintly, a reminder that even in a universe dominated by the Force, he remained a force unto himself. The Jedi emerged from a central plaza below, their blue and green blades humming as they surveyed the periphery. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated, each sensing the unnatural energy radiating from the gods above. Kratos noted the elegance and precision, the discipline that the Force instilled in them, and he recognized that strength alone would not compel compliance here. Strategy and leverage would be required. "Father," Atreus said quietly, "they are communicating, not verbally, but with each other, through the Force." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "Then we must be careful. They are testing us, gauging our power, but they are not yet fully aware of our capabilities." He scanned the cityscape, calculating angles, high ground, and potential choke points. "We move in shadows. We strike only when necessary. And we learn." The first engagement came unexpectedly. Patrol droids, responding to the Jedi's presence, converged on the plaza. Kratos moved with lethal precision, his axe slicing through droid exteriors with divine force, while Atreus' arrows disabled the remaining units, the magic-laced projectiles causing short circuits in their systems. The Jedi watched silently, assessing but not intervening yet, their patience and discipline evident. Kratos spoke, low and deliberate. "They are not enemies yet. But every action here carries weight. We cannot afford missteps." The city's denizens, sensing the unusual presence of these intruders, began to stir, whispers rippling through the streets. Kratos realized that their every movement was now observed not just by the Jedi and Imperial remnants, but by civilians, spies, and informants, a complex web of factions beyond immediate recognition. Even mercenaries or underworld figures could be lurking, waiting to exploit weakness or conflict. Then came the signal, a massive energy surge pulsating through the city. Kratos felt it in his bones, a resonance that even his divine power could not entirely comprehend. The force around them rippled violently, as if the city itself were alive and reacting to their presence. Kratos turned to Atreus. "The city is aware, and it is testing us." Atreus' eyes widened. "Father, what do we do?" Kratos' voice was calm but steely. "We adapt. We fight only if necessary, and we strike with precision. We are not here to conquer, but to survive and understand. Every action carries a consequence." He shifted, moving toward a narrow alley that offered a tactical advantage, cover, high ground, and an observation point over the central plaza. From their vantage, they could see the Jedi splitting into two groups, some advancing to engage potential threats, while others maintained a protective perimeter. Kratos observed the subtle force-based communication among them, their coordinated approach a testament to rigorous training. Yet he noticed cracks in their strategy, gaps in the coverage, small openings in the perimeter, weaknesses that could be exploited if survival demanded it. Suddenly, a Sith presence flared at the edge of the city, sending a tremor through the Force. The air grew thick, charged with malevolent energy. Kratos' instincts flared. This was not merely a test. It was a warning. The Sith intended to interfere, and the outcome of this encounter could tip the balance of power in ways Kratos could not yet fully anticipate. Atreus whispered, tension evident in his tone. "Father, the dark presence, it's strong. I can feel it trying to reach us." Kratos' hands clenched around the axe. "Then we prepare. This is a galaxy of shadows, not honor alone. Strength and cunning are necessary. We cannot underestimate the dark or the light." Kratos moved first, descending the alley with quiet, calculated steps. Each footfall was deliberate, every glance scanning for ambush or trap. Atreus followed, his bow ready, energy arrows glowing faintly. The city seemed to pulse with anticipation, the Force reacting to their divine energy like water rippling around an immovable stone. A group of Jedi scouts advanced into the plaza, sensing the presence above. Their blades hummed, their movements cautious. Kratos watched, analyzing patterns, waiting for the precise moment when intervention might become necessary. One Jedi extended a hand subtly, a gesture of communication, and Kratos felt the Force reach for him, not to harm, but to probe, to understand. The moment was tense, a fragile balance between diplomacy, strategy, and survival. Kratos' presence radiated dominance and caution simultaneously. He did not speak, did not act aggressively, yet his mere aura conveyed power, control, and inevitability. The Jedi halted, sensing the immense potential before them, waiting to see if the god from another reality would strike or retreat. Atreus, sensing the subtle hesitation, whispered, "Father, they are waiting." Kratos nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then we teach them caution. We do not need to strike yet." His eyes scanned the plaza, noting energy readings, patrol movements, and civilian positions. Every choice here mattered. Every action would ripple through the galaxy. Suddenly, an Imperial patrol attempted to flank the Jedi from the city outskirts. The two sides collided with force and precision, but Kratos and Atreus remained hidden, observers as much as participants. The skirmish revealed patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities, lessons to be learned without unnecessary exposure. Kratos finally spoke, voice low, carrying weight and authority. "We are not intruders, not yet enemies. But this city, this galaxy, it is alive, and we must respect its rules while bending them to survive. We must be ready, always ready, for the forces that will come." The Jedi withdrew slightly, uncertain but respectful, leaving Kratos and Atreus in temporary control of their movements. The Force around them hummed with anticipation, aware that a god from another world had arrived, reshaping the subtle currents of power, morality, and destiny in ways no one could yet predict. Kratos looked to Atreus, a rare moment of gravity and reflection in his eyes. "Every step we take from here will test us, not just in strength, but in judgment. Remember, the choices we make define the path forward. Survival is not enough. We must shape the outcome." Atreus nodded, absorbing the lesson. In this galaxy, power was not merely physical. It was moral, political, and spiritual. And their journey had only just begun. Night fell like a velvet curtain over the city, the glow of neon lights and hovering transports casting erratic shadows across its streets. Kratos and Atreus moved silently through the rooftops, the godly aura of the former and the magical presence of the latter blending with the force that saturated this world. The earlier encounter with the Jedi had left ripples in the city's balance. Curiosity, caution, and now subtle fear radiated from the populace and factions alike. Kratos' eyes scanned the streets below, noting the patterns of patrols, the energy signatures of surveillance drones, and the faint traces of force-sensitive activity. "This city is more than it seems," he said. "Its heartbeat is layered, technology, power, politics, all intertwined. One misstep could draw enemies from every direction. Atreus' gaze followed his father's, arrows nocked and glowing. Father, the dark energy is returning. It's stronger now, closer and waiting. Kratos tightened his grip on the Leviathan axe. Then we must draw it out. Force it to reveal its intentions. Patience is our weapon here, as much as strength. He moved silently to a vantage point overlooking a large plaza, where an Imperial communications hub sat, a nexus of information, patrol coordination, and potential vulnerabilities. Below, a group of Imperial officers gathered, discussing the mysterious intruders who had dismantled patrols and escaped Jedi observation. They spoke of strange, godlike powers, of an aura that interfered with technology, and of tactics that defied any known strategy. Rumors of Kratos and Atreus spread quickly, reaching the ears of mercenaries, spies, and Sith agents alike. The galaxy had become aware, and awareness brought scrutiny and danger. Kratos' plan was deliberate: manipulate the factions to reveal themselves while maintaining the advantage. He had faced gods, titans, and armies in his own realm. Here, the challenge was subtler, political and spiritual, as well as physical. He needed intelligence, leverage, and precise action. Atreus followed his lead, understanding that brute force alone would not suffice. Suddenly, a Sith operative revealed themselves, stepping from the shadows with the deliberate grace of someone attuned to the dark side. The malevolent energy radiating from the figure was palpable, tugging subtly at Kratos' own godly power, testing limits and boundaries. Unlike any mortal foe, this presence sought to manipulate, to probe weaknesses, and perhaps even to turn the god from another reality into a weapon or adversary. Kratos held the Leviathan axe ready, stance wide and deliberate. "You test me," he said, voice steady. "I do not bend. I do not yield." The Sith smiled faintly, a shadow across the dim light. Power from another world fascinating. Yet even gods can be broken. He extended a hand subtly, the force curling like dark water around Kratos' aura. Kratos felt the surge, an alien sensation against his own divine energy. Rage flickered briefly, a familiar instinct, but he tempered it. Control was paramount. Every strike, every move, every decision had consequences. From above, Atreus whispered, "Father, he's strong, and he senses you differently than the Jedi." Kratos nodded. "The dark side is precise. He seeks to exploit, not merely test. We must act carefully, yet decisively." The encounter escalated quickly. Blaster fire erupted as Imperial reinforcements attempted to flank the plaza, drawn by the Sith's subtle commands. Kratos leapt into action, his Leviathan axe cleaving through armored troopers with unerring precision. Each swing sent shockwaves that disrupted formations, shattered weaponry, and left the battlefield in chaotic disarray. Atreus followed suit, his magic-enhanced arrows disabling surveillance droids and striking with exacting accuracy. The Sith moved through the chaos with unnerving agility, testing Kratos' reflexes and anticipating his attacks. For the first time, Kratos recognized the limitations imposed by this galaxy. The Force interfered subtly with his godly powers, reducing their efficiency by roughly 10%, a temporary and frustrating adaptation he had to accept. Yet even at diminished capacity, his combat instincts were unparalleled. Kratos feinted, drawing the Sith forward, baiting him into a narrow passage. Atreus provided covering fire, ensuring no escape. The Sith extended his dark side energy, attempting to manipulate Kratos' perception and the environment. The God of War responded with strategy, turning each manipulation against the Sith, using debris, energy surges, and controlled shockwaves to force a tactical advantage. Finally, Kratos confronted the Sith directly, Leviathan axe poised for a decisive strike. The clash of power was extraordinary. Dark energy swirling against godly might, force manipulations countered by divine reflexes, the plaza itself trembling under the combined presence. Kratos' voice carried across the chaos. "I have faced gods, titans, and monsters beyond reckoning. You are not beyond me." The Sith recoiled slightly, recognizing the unique synergy of Kratos' power and Atreus' magic. The Force was no longer a simple instrument. It was a landscape Kratos had begun to navigate, bending its currents with instinct and adaptability. With a calculated swing, he disarmed the Sith, sending his lightsaber spinning into the air before it clattered uselessly to the ground. Atreus' arrow pinioned the Sith to a wall, magical energy crackling in a subtle restraint. Kratos stepped forward, Leviathan axe glowing faintly. "This is your warning. Leave now, or face the consequences." The Sith eyes narrowed, recognized not just power, but calculated judgment and restraint, qualities unexpected in an entity of raw might. With a final measured glance, he vanished into the shadows, retreating for now. Atreus exhaled, lowering his bow. "Father, that was different." He was strong, but careful. "He knew you were not ordinary." Kratos' gaze swept over the plaza, now littered with the remnants of combat, burned-out droids, scattered equipment, and the faint aura of the Force disturbed by the encounter. "Strength alone does not define victory here," he said. "Every action carries consequences. Every enemy, every ally, every choice shapes the path forward." The city remained tense, alive with the echoes of power and conflict. Kratos and Atreus had not only survived, but had begun to understand the delicate balance of factions, technology, and the Force itself. Allies and enemies were now aware of their presence, and the stakes had risen dramatically. As they moved to higher ground, observing the city's layers and potential next moves, Kratos reflected on the challenges ahead. The Empire, the Jedi, Sith, mercenaries, and underworld figures, all now had reason to track, test, or manipulate them. Every decision would ripple across this galaxy, influencing battles, alliances, and the very perception of power. Atreus looked to his father, a mix of awe and uncertainty in his gaze. "Father, what now?" Kratos' expression was grim but resolute. "We learn, we adapt, and we strike when necessary. The galaxy tests all who enter it, and we will not be defined by it. Every step, every battle, every choice, we define ourselves." Above, the night deepened, the city alive with currents of energy, politics, and observation. Somewhere beyond, unseen eyes calculated, monitored, and speculated. Kratos and Atreus had entered the crucible of the Star Wars galaxy, and survival would demand mastery not only of power, but of cunning, strategy, and the unpredictable tides of fate. Dawn approached, painting the sprawling city with muted golds and pale blues. But the serenity of the morning was a lie. The streets below teemed with activity, each movement a potential threat or opportunity. Kratos and Atreus had withdrawn to the ruins of an old observatory at the city's edge, a vantage point that overlooked both the central hub and the outer rim expanse beyond. Here, strategy outweighed brute strength, though the latter remained at their disposal. Kratos scanned the horizon, noting the subtle movements of Imperial patrols and underworld scouts. "The Empire is consolidating its power," he said. "They see the disturbance we caused. Jedi presence, Sith interference, they will act decisively if given the chance." Atreus, perched on the ledge beside him, nodded, absorbing the complexity of this galaxy. His magic-honed senses picked up subtle currents in the Force, each twist a whisper of potential danger, each ripple a hint of opportunity. Their observations were interrupted by a faint but insistent vibration through the Force. Kratos' eyes narrowed. Someone approaches, not for diplomacy. This is a hunter. From the city's central spire, a squad of Mandalorian assassins descended, their jetpacks kicking up dust and energy particles in the early light. Beskar armor gleamed faintly, weapons calibrated to lethal efficiency. They were not Imperial, nor Jedi, nor Sith, but professionals who dealt in contracts and discretion. Their objective was simple: eliminate the anomaly destabilizing the outer rim. Kratos moved first, his Leviathan axe humming as it responded to his divine power. He leapt down from the observatory's edge, landing in a controlled impact that shook the ground, and swung with calculated force. The first assassin met the blade with a vibro-crescent shield, sparks flying as metal met enchanted metal. Atreus fired in tandem, arrows laced with magic striking drones and suppressing energy shields with surgical precision. The Mandalorians adapted quickly, employing tactical formations and coordinated attacks. Jetpacks allowed for rapid repositioning, blaster rifles provided covering fire, and energy whips created barriers to control movement. Kratos countered with instinctive strategy, anticipating maneuvers, exploiting gaps, and using the terrain to channel attacks. Every swing of his axe and every strike of his fists was deliberate, methodical, a lethal fusion of godlike power and battle-honed discipline. Atreus shouted, "Father, the dark energy, it's rising again. Something bigger is coming." Kratos' eyes darted toward the skyline. There, faintly visible through the haze, emerged the silhouette of a Sith warlord, immense in presence and radiating malice. This was no ordinary duel. This was a test of strategy, power, and adaptability. The warlord's aura pushed against Kratos' divine essence, interfering with his godly might in subtle, frustrating ways. Yet even at 80 to 90% efficiency, Kratos' instincts were lethal. The battle escalated with brutal intensity. Kratos' Leviathan axe clashed with Mandalorian weaponry, sending shockwaves through the streets. Atreus' arrows disrupted patrol patterns, disabled energy barriers, and created openings. The Sith warlord probed with the dark side, seeking to manipulate the environment and exploit weaknesses in Kratos' technique. But Kratos had learned to adapt. He manipulated the terrain, using debris, structures, and the very currents of the Force to counterattacks, and forced the Sith and Mandalorians into disadvantageous positions. At one point, Kratos leapt high into the air, spinning to redirect an incoming volley of blaster fire back at the Mandalorians, demonstrating not only brute strength, but tactical ingenuity. Atreus used the opportunity to strike at the warlord's defenses, his arrows piercing energy shields with magical precision. The Sith growled, realizing that raw power alone could not dictate the outcome. The confrontation became a study in contrasts. Kratos' methodical, calculated violence against the Sith's manipulation and the Mandalorians' lethal efficiency. The streets were a maze of energy surges, debris, and tactical maneuvers, each side probing for weaknesses, calculating risk, and striking with measured force. Civilians and minor factions scattered, their observations further complicating the battlefield's moral and strategic calculus. Amid the chaos, Kratos made a critical, morally complex decision. A Mandalorian, uninjured but poised to strike, hesitated, clearly bound by code or contract. Kratos saw an opportunity, not merely to defeat, but to manipulate allegiance. He used a subtle display of force and authority, demonstrating his godly power while restraining lethal action. The Mandalorian paused, recalibrating their judgment. Survival, honor, and pragmatism had been intertwined into a single choice. Kratos allowed the Mandalorian to withdraw under the condition of neutrality, preserving his moral agency while ensuring immediate tactical advantage. Atreus whispered, awe in his voice, "Father, you could have destroyed them. Why didn't you?" Kratos' expression was grim but composed. Power is not always measured in destruction. Every choice here reverberates. Sometimes restraint defines the victor more than conquest. As the battle subsided, Kratos and Atreus stood among the remnants of the conflict, burned-out droids, discarded weaponry, and the faint echoes of the Force still lingering in the air. The Sith warlord retreated, recognizing that Kratos' adaptability, strength, and strategic mind made direct confrontation perilous. The Mandalorians dispersed, their respect for Kratos tempered by caution and honor. The city itself seemed to breathe around them, alive with currents of observation, energy, and potential alliances. Kratos knew that survival was no longer simply about defeating immediate threats. It required mastery of perception, strategy, and diplomacy within a galaxy teeming with unpredictable factions. Atreus turned to his father, determination in his eyes. "Father, we've survived this. But the galaxy, it's changing because of us. Every move we make, every choice, it matters." Kratos nodded, eyes sweeping the horizon. "Then we adapt, we learn, and we move forward. Every decision, every battle, every interaction. These define not only our survival, but the path we carve through this galaxy. And we will ensure that path remains ours to command. Above, the sun rose fully, casting light across the sprawling city and the outer rim beyond. The god from another reality had faced powerful adversaries, navigated complex factions, and demonstrated that adaptability, strategy, and moral discernment were as lethal as divine strength. Yet the war was far from over. The Empire, the Jedi, the Sith, and innumerable factions watched, waiting for the next move. And Kratos and Atreus were ready. Kratos and Atreus had withdrawn to a network of abandoned industrial spires at the edge of the city, the once bustling facilities now silent except for the faint hum of residual machinery. From this height, they could observe both the inner city and the approaches from the outer rim, a vantage that allowed strategic planning while minimizing exposure. The previous battles had drawn attention from multiple factions: the Empire, the remnants of Sith operatives, Mandalorian clans, and even rogue criminal syndicates. Each observer added tension, turning the city into a living chessboard. Atreus scanned the streets below, magical energy flaring faintly around his hands. "Father, I can feel the Force. It's different here. More tension. All factions are aware, and they're circling, waiting for us to make a move." Kratos' gaze was unyielding. "Then we dictate the terms. The galaxy reacts to power, yes, but also to decisiveness. Hesitation is a luxury we cannot afford." He adjusted the Leviathan axe across his shoulders, its edge catching the light of a rising sun. "We must strike not with reckless force, but with precision. Every engagement must teach us, weaken the enemy or forge allies, or at least non-enemies." Their first challenge came from the underworld. Syndicates, noticing the chaos and the weakening of imperial influence in parts of the city, dispatched assassins and informants to evaluate the anomaly that Kratos and Atreus represented. These agents were skilled, armed with experimental blasters, and deeply familiar with urban guerrilla tactics. Kratos' divine awareness allowed him to anticipate movements before they materialized. Atreus' precision strikes neutralized threats without excessive collateral damage. Kratos' strategy was methodical. He allowed minor forces to approach, observing their tactics, learning their capabilities. He understood that each encounter provided not only survival lessons, but also insight into the complex hierarchy of factions, the interplay of power, and the subtleties of force-sensitive observation. Every minor skirmish became a source of intelligence. Suddenly, a star destroyer emerged on the horizon, an imperial symbol of authority and threat. Its weapons arrays glinted ominously, and communications transmissions began to interfere with the city's electronic network. Kratos recognized that the Empire sought to assert control, perhaps believing the anomaly a dire threat. He weighed his options carefully. A direct confrontation would draw immense attention, but leaving it unchecked allowed the Empire to dictate engagement terms. Atreus said quietly, "Father, they're preparing for a strike. The force around them, it's tense, controlled, and dangerous. If we engage now, it'll be a full-scale conflict." Kratos nodded. "Then we do not engage blindly. We manipulate the battlefield. Use the city, its structures, and the currents of the Force to offset their advantage." He moved through the abandoned spires, calculating line of sight, choke points, and potential ambush corridors. Even the Force itself became a tool. As Kratos sensed energy flows he could anticipate, redirect, or exploit. As night fell again, a squadron of TIE fighters descended toward the city's industrial sector, escorted by a battalion of stormtroopers. Kratos waited, holding his position atop a narrow catwalk. Using the verticality of the spires, he leapt down, the Leviathan axe cleaving through armored troopers with divine precision. Shock waves reverberated across the metal floors, toppling crates and machinery to block pursuers and control their approach. Atreus unleashed a flurry of magic-imbued arrows, targeting energy conduits and droid reinforcements, temporarily crippling their coordination. From above, the Sith warlord observed, radiating a menacing aura. He had regrouped, drawn by the ripple effects of Kratos' prior actions, seeking a confrontation where power tactics, and morality collided. This was more than a duel, it was a clash of philosophies. The warlord attempted to manipulate the Force subtly, creating illusions, amplifying fear in Imperial ranks, and testing the resolve of Kratos and Atreus. Yet Kratos, ever adaptable, used these manipulations to misdirect enemies, turning deception into tactical advantage. The battle escalated into a multi-faction engagement. Imperial forces attempted to encircle them. Mandalorian clans arrived to reclaim lost honor and contracts, and the Sith warlord probed for vulnerabilities. Kratos' godlike reflexes and strategic mind allowed him to maintain dominance, while Atreus' magic augmented their offensive and defensive capabilities. Every strike was calculated, every movement deliberate, balancing efficiency with minimal collateral impact. At a critical moment, Kratos made a morally complex decision. An Imperial officer attempted to surrender, clearly outmatched and fearful. The usual instinct might demand swift elimination to prevent future threats, but Kratos recognized the opportunity to manipulate allegiance, enforce restraint, and convey dominance without unnecessary bloodshed. He allowed the officer to withdraw under clear terms of neutrality, sending a message to the Empire that their presence was noted, but not to be underestimated. Atreus whispered in awe, "Father, you've used restraint as strategy. They'll remember this." Kratos' voice was firm. Every choice shapes the future. Power without wisdom is destruction. Restraint can be a weapon if wielded correctly. By dawn, the engagement had concluded. The city lay in partial ruin, but the strategic victory was clear. Kratos and Atreus had demonstrated superiority, manipulated factional dynamics, and learned from the encounter. The Empire had observed, the Sith had tested, and the Mandalorians had acknowledged tactical brilliance tempered by moral discretion. The ripple effects of their actions would echo across the galaxy, redefining perceptions of power and influence. As they surveyed the battlefield, Kratos' eyes hardened with resolve. This galaxy is complex, unpredictable, and alive. Every enemy, every ally, every choice shapes the course of events. We are not invaders, we are participants, and we will define our path. Atreus nodded, the weight of their journey evident in his expression. "Father, this is only the beginning. Every faction, every Force-sensitive, they'll watch, and they'll react. But now we have the advantage." Kratos' jaw tightened. "Then we keep moving, keep adapting, and strike when necessary. Strength, strategy, and judgment, these will carry us further than brute power alone." The morning sun illuminated the spires, glinting off the Leviathan axe and Atreus' bow, symbols of a god and his son navigating a galaxy defined by conflict, philosophy, and the Force. The starlit skies above the city shimmered with tension, as if the Force itself held its breath. Kratos and Atreus had ascended to the highest tower of the industrial district, using the vantage to anticipate movements from multiple factions. Reports of their previous engagements had reached Imperial officers, Sith operatives, Mandalorian clans, and criminal syndicates alike. The entire galaxy seemed to have recognized their presence, and all were converging toward one inevitable confrontation. Kratos' eyes scanned the horizon, noting the approach of multiple Imperial star destroyers, several Mandalorian cruisers, and a visible surge of Sith-aligned energy. "This is the moment," he said grimly. "All factions converge. Every choice, every move, every battle. It leads here. We fight not for survival alone, but for control of the narrative this galaxy tells about us." Atreus' senses flared, his magic harmonizing with the currents of the Force. "Father, the dark energy is overwhelming. It's more than the warlord, it's every manipulator in the system converging. They intend to crush us." Kratos clenched the Leviathan axe. "Then we force them to play by our rules. Every engagement has taught us how to anticipate, how to adapt, and how to exploit weakness. Now we strike decisively." The first wave emerged. Imperial battalions deploying ground forces, TIE fighters strafing streets, and droid reinforcements descending from orbit. The Mandalorians established defensive lines, testing loyalty and contract compliance. The Sith warlord appeared, radiating dark side energy, a storm of manipulation, fear, and lethal precision. Kratos understood that this confrontation was more than physical. It was philosophical, strategic, and morally complex. Kratos leapt into action. His Leviathan axe cleaved through armored troopers, each swing precise, each movement calculated. Shockwaves disrupted enemy formations, while Atreus' magic-enhanced arrows disabled energy shields, disrupted droids, and created openings in enemy lines. The city became a crucible of violence and strategy, a testing ground for divine power adapted to the rules of a galaxy governed by the Force. The Sith warlord advanced, manipulating the Force to create illusions, amplify fear, and disrupt the environment. Kratos countered by using the terrain and currents of energy he had learned to sense, turning the warlord's manipulations against him. Atreus fired a series of arrows that combined magic and force-sensitive energy, piercing through defenses and revealing the warlord's vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, Mandalorians engaged strategically, not with blind aggression, but with calculated strikes. Kratos adapted, allowing some to pass while isolating others, demonstrating a mastery of tactical restraint. He recognized that every ally neutralized, every foe spared, and every maneuver executed with precision contributed to a larger pattern of influence. Amid the chaos, Kratos faced a critical moral dilemma. A Sith acolyte attempted to flee, carrying intelligence that could shift the balance of power in the sector. The instinctive response would be to kill and eliminate future threat, but Kratos recognized a more strategic path. By allowing the acolyte to live under strict conditions, he demonstrated dominance, calculated mercy, and preserved leverage. Every action was deliberate, shaping perception across multiple factions. The battle's climax arrived as the Sith warlord channeled a torrent of dark side energy, aiming to overwhelm Kratos and Atreus simultaneously. The God of War, though slightly limited by the Force's interference with his godly power, used every ounce of skill, strength, and strategy. He manipulated shockwaves, redirected energy attacks, and struck with decisive precision, forcing the warlord onto the defensive. Atreus unleashed a coordinated strike, combining magic and force-sensitive attacks, creating an energy lattice that pinned the Sith and disrupted their power. Kratos followed immediately, the Leviathan axe glowing with otherworldly intensity as he struck in a calculated arc. The warlord staggered, defeated yet alive, recognizing that brute strength alone had not won. Strategy, adaptability, and moral calculus had defined victory. The city, now littered with debris, scorched ground, and the faint echoes of the Force, stood witness to an extraordinary display of power, ingenuity, and tactical brilliance. Imperial forces, Mandalorians, and minor factions observed from a distance, recalibrating their understanding of the anomaly that Kratos and Atreus represented. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Power from another world could adapt, endure, and dominate within its own rules. Kratos surveyed the battlefield, breathing heavily but unwavering. Every choice defines the outcome. Every battle leaves a mark. This galaxy has seen what we are capable of, but also what we will not sacrifice. Power tempered by wisdom, strategy tempered by restraint, this is the path forward. Atreus, eyes wide with the weight of their accomplishments, whispered, "Father, we've changed the game. Every faction, every force-sensitive, they'll remember this." Kratos nodded, the Leviathan axe resting across his shoulders. "Then we use that knowledge. The galaxy is vast, unpredictable, and alive. Every enemy, every ally, every faction, they will watch, adapt, and react. But we define our path. We control what we can, and we endure what we must. Our journey is far from over, but the outcome of this battle, this moment, is ours." Above, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent yet observant. The convergence of divine might, mortal strategy, and galactic factions had produced a battle that would echo across systems. Kratos and Atreus had demonstrated that adaptability, moral discernment, and unyielding strength could reshape even the most complex of galaxies. Yet as the smoke cleared, the consequences of their actions, both immediate and long-term, were only beginning to take shape. The aftermath of the climactic battle settled over the city like a heavy, electric fog. The streets bore the scars of combat, charred armor, shattered blaster rifles, collapsed walkways, and the faint hum of force disturbances lingering in the air. Kratos and Atreus stood atop a tall observation spire, surveying the chaos below. From this height, the true scale of what had transpired became clear. Multiple factions had been tested, strategies undermined, and reputations forever altered. Kratos' expression was contemplative, his godly aura faintly shimmering in the early light. "This galaxy is unlike any I have faced," he said. "Power here is not absolute. It is intertwined with perception, politics, and the currents of the Force. Every faction we engaged, every enemy we faced, every choice we made, it reverberates far beyond this city." Atreus nodded, his gaze tracing the faint outlines of approaching reinforcements and observers. "Father, the Jedi, the Empire, even the Mandalorians, they will adapt. They will study what we've done and plan their next move. We've won this battle, but the war for influence, that's only beginning." Kratos' hands gripped the Leviathan axe tightly. "Then we prepare. We learn. We adapt. Strength alone is not enough. Strategy and foresight are equally vital. We move not as invaders, but as forces the galaxy cannot ignore. Every encounter teaches us, every choice shapes perception, and every victory, even if small, carves a path forward." The convergence of factions in the city had produced unexpected results. The Sith warlord retreated, not entirely defeated, but humbled. His respect for Kratos and Atreus' combination of power and tactical mastery begrudgingly acknowledged. Mandalorian clans recognized a strategic mind paired with divine strength, some grudgingly considering future alliances, others recalculating contracts to account for the new balance of power. The Empire, observing from orbit and through communications networks, reassessed their intelligence reports and adjusted patrols, wary of this anomaly from another reality. Kratos' approach had not only ensured survival, but also asserted dominance, without unnecessary annihilation. He had demonstrated that restraint, strategy, and moral discernment could be just as potent as raw power. Atreus' contributions were equally vital. Magical precision, tactical foresight, and force-sensitive intuition had complemented his father's might, proving that synergy was as important as individual strength. Yet the galaxy remained a living, unpredictable entity. Criminal syndicates and rogue factions, sensing the temporary shift in power, began repositioning themselves, seeking opportunities amidst the chaos. Kratos recognized that his presence, and that of Atreus, had shifted the balance of influence, forcing all factions to recalibrate their plans, allegiances, and ambitions. As the sun fully rose, casting pale light over the battered city, Kratos and Atreus began moving toward the next phase of their journey. Their immediate victories had earned them breathing space, but survival, influence, and understanding required continued vigilance. Kratos reflected on the lessons gleaned from their engagements: power tempered by wisdom, force balanced by strategy, and moral decisions carrying consequences that extended beyond the battlefield. Atreus, ever observant, spoke softly. "Father, do you think we can ever truly belong here? Or are we destined to always be outsiders, shaping the galaxy, but never part of it?" Kratos' gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "Perhaps we belong neither here nor in our old world. Perhaps we are the bridge between realms, the force that challenges perception, the proof that power, divine or mortal, must always be tempered by judgment. Our place is forged by action, choice, and the path we carve ourselves. And this galaxy will remember that path." The city slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Repairs began, patrols adjusted, and factions recalculated strategies. The story of the god and his son from another reality spread through whispers, reports, and rumors. To some, they were harbingers of hope. To others, they were a threat beyond comprehension. The balance of power had been shifted, but the galaxy was far from resolved. Kratos and Atreus descended from the observation spire, their figures silhouetted against the rising sun. The Leviathan axe and magical bow were ready, but so too was their understanding of the delicate currents that governed this galaxy. They had survived titans of technology, masters of the Force, and mercenaries of unparalleled skill. Yet the journey ahead promised even greater challenges, more enemies, more alliances, and more tests of their combined might, wisdom, and morality. Kratos spoke, his voice steady and commanding. This galaxy will challenge us, as it challenges all who seek to influence it. But we endure, we adapt, we strike when necessary, and we define our path not through domination alone, but through understanding, strategy, and the calculated use of power. Let every faction learn this. We are not to be underestimated, and our actions will echo across systems for years to come. Atreus looked at his father, awe and resolve in equal measure. Then let them watch, Father. Let them see what we are capable of. And let them remember, we are not here to serve. We are here to endure and shape. As the sun illuminated the spires and cityscape, Kratos and Atreus walked forward, stepping into a galaxy that had been irrevocably changed by their arrival. The convergence of divine might, mortal strategy, and the unpredictable currents of the Force had forged a new reality. Factions had been tested, alliances recalibrated, and the galaxy had glimpsed a force unlike any it had seen before, a god and his son from another world, capable of both devastating power and calculated restraint. The story of their presence, battles, and choices would ripple across star systems, influencing events long after they had moved on. The Star Wars galaxy had survived their arrival, but it had been altered forever, and Kratos and Atreus, outsiders though they were, had claimed their place not through blind destruction, but through wisdom, strength, and the undeniable truth of their actions. The galaxy had been tested in ways it had never imagined. Kratos and Atreus, God and son from another reality, had arrived not merely as outsiders, but as catalysts, forcing factions to re-evaluate power, strategy, and morality. Their presence had disrupted the careful balance between Jedi, Sith, Empire, Mandalorian clans, and criminal syndicates. Every choice, whether to strike, restrain, or manipulate, reverberated across the city and the Outer Rim, leaving a trail of lessons in its wake. The Sith warlord had retreated with newfound caution, Mandalorians reconsidered loyalty, and the Empire watched warily, aware that the anomaly they had underestimated could not be contained by force alone. Kratos' strength and strategy, tempered by restraint and moral judgment, had proven that survival in this galaxy demanded more than brute power. Atreus' magical and force-sensitive abilities amplified their influence, showing that synergy between mind, skill, and adaptability was key to mastering unpredictable systems. Though they remained outsiders, their actions reshaped perceptions, shifted alliances, and demonstrated that a combination of divine might and calculated wisdom could redefine a galaxy's balance of power. The future remained uncertain, but one truth was undeniable. Wherever they went, the galaxy would remember them. And in that memory, the echoes of their choices would resonate, shaping battles, alliances, and the fate of systems for generations to come.